The history of the world is often written by those who control the largest printing presses. For centuries, the Western world has relied on a biblical canon that is lean, streamlined, and strictly curated. In the book of Genesis, we are offered a familiar account of creation, the fall of man, and a brief genealogical record. We are told that Adam lived 930 years, and then he died. That is all. A single, stark sentence to encapsulate nearly a millennium of existence. But across the Red Sea, nestled in the rugged highlands of Ethiopia, a vastly different account of history was meticulously preserved. Here, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church possesses a library of ancient scrolls containing stories the rest of the world has long forgotten. These are the books that delve into the why and the how. Rather than simply stating that Adam died, they chronicle his final moments, his deepest fears, and a secret legacy he entrusted to his children. These ancient scrolls reveal that the end of the first man was no quiet fading away, but a cataclysmic, supernatural event that shook the very foundations of the newly formed earth. Today, we step beyond the standard text and into these forbidden archives to discover the unbelievable truth of what transpired after the first man drew his last breath. To truly grasp the gravity of Adam's death, we must first understand the immense weight of his life. Imagine living for 9 centuries, not as a gift, but as an extended state of mourning. The Ethiopian Scrolls portray Adam as a man perpetually haunted by the memory of the light. The text tells us that before the fall, Adam and Eve did not wear clothes of wool or skin. They were quite literally clothed in divine radiance, their bodies glowing and translucent, mirroring the glory of their Creator. When they were exiled from the garden, that light was extinguished. For 930 years, Adam looked at his own skin, now opaque, vulnerable to injury, and slowly wrinkling with age, and felt the physical sting of his failure. The scrolls describe his life outside of Eden as a constant struggle against a world that had become hostile. The very ground that once offered its fruit freely now resisted him with thorns and thistles. The animals that had once bowed in his presence now regarded him with predatory eyes. The Ethiopian Bible powerfully emphasizes that Adam's long life was not a blessing, but a long, slow penance. He was the only human being in history who could truly comprehend what had been lost, because he was the only one who had ever breathed the very atmosphere of heaven. According to the ancient Ge'ez manuscripts, death was not a single event for Adam. It was a triple-layered tragedy. And the first death occurred the moment he ate the forbidden fruit. This was a spiritual death, the severing of the umbilical cord connecting the human soul to the divine presence. He was still walking, breathing, and living, but the essential life force within him had gone dark. The second death was relational. Adam was forced to witness the literal decay of his own family. The scrolls give a heartbreaking account of the murder of Abel. Because no human had ever died, Adam and Eve were confronted with a terrifying mystery. They saw their son's body grow cold and watched the color drain from his face. For days they sat by his side, calling his name, believing he was merely lost in a deep sleep. It was only when they saw the birds of the air circling and fighting over his remains that the horror of their new reality finally set in, and they had to bury their own son in the dirt, consumed by the realization that they had brought this dust-to-dust curse upon their children. Finally, as he approached his 10th century of life, the third death arrived, the physical collapse of his body. The scrolls say that Adam's body became a living map of the world's suffering. His bones ached with the weight of centuries, and his heart was heavy with the crushing knowledge that he was the gatekeeper who had failed, allowing death to enter the world. As the end drew near, Adam did something extraordinary. He did not prepare for a simple grave. Instead, he directed his son, Seth, to a specific location known as the Cave of Treasures. This cave was situated on the side of a holy mountain, near the very borders of the lost Garden of Eden. In Ethiopian tradition, this cave became the world's first church, its first sacred library, and its first royal vault. Adam instructed Seth that upon his death, his body was to be embalmed with the holy spices of the mountain. But more importantly, he revealed a profound secret. When he was expelled from the garden, he had managed to carry out 3 specific items: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These were not mere trinkets. They were sacred tokens of Eden. Adam commanded that these treasures be placed in the cave alongside his body. He told Seth that these items must be guarded at all costs, for they were a prophecy in physical form. Adam predicted that many generations later, the world would fall into a deep spiritual darkness. But these treasures, he explained, would eventually be taken from his tomb and presented to a king who would be born in a cave, destined to restore the divine light that Adam himself had lost. This hidden detail in the Ethiopian Scrolls forges a stunning connection between the world's beginning and the birth of Christ. A connection most people have never heard. On his deathbed, Adam gathered his descendants. The scene described in the scrolls is both cinematic and heavy with emotion. He offered more than a blessing. He delivered a solemn warning. He commanded the tribes of Seth to remain on the holy mountain, to stay separate from the tribes of Cain, who had settled in the valley below. He warned them that the descendants of Cain would develop alluring technologies, music, and arts designed specifically to distract the soul from God. He prophesied that beautiful sights and sounds would be weaponized to lure the children of Seth down from the mountain. His final testament was a desperate plea for spiritual separation, for he knew the world was about to become a battlefield of competing frequencies and desires. As he finished his warning, the scrolls say a divine silence fell over the earth. Adam closed his eyes, and the first human heart stopped beating. The year was 930 after creation. One of the most frequent questions asked by scholars of the scrolls is, where is Eve? In the book of Genesis, she is mentioned at the fall and at the birth of her sons, and then she vanishes from the historical record. There is no account of her death. The Ethiopian tradition offers a beautiful and haunting explanation. It suggests that Eve's ending was deliberately kept secret because she represents the life that cannot be fully extinguished. While Adam represents the law and the judgment of death, Eve represents the promise. The scrolls hint that Eve lived on after Adam, continuing to guide the family of Seth and serving as a living bridge between the world that was and the world that was to come. Some manuscripts suggest she was eventually laid to rest in the Cave of Treasures beside her husband. But the deliberate silence of the text serves a higher theological purpose. It keeps the focus on the seed of the woman, who was promised to one day crush the head of the serpent. But the story of Adam's body does not end in the Cave of Treasures, and the Ethiopian Scrolls follow his remains through the Great Flood. They tell us that Noah was commanded by God to take Adam's coffin onto the ark. Amidst the cataclysm, as the fountains of the deep burst open and the world was purged by water, the bones of the first man were kept safe within the vessel. After the flood, Noah's son Shem was tasked with a final, sacred mission. Guided by an angel, he took the body of Adam to the very center of the earth, to a place known as the place of the skull. In the Ge'ez texts, this location is identified as the hill of Golgotha. The tradition holds that Adam was buried in the precise location where the cross of Christ would one day be erected. This brings the epic story to a mind-blowing conclusion. The Ethiopian Bible teaches that when the Roman spear pierced the side of Jesus, the blood and water that flowed down the cross trickled through the cracks in the rock and touched the skull of Adam buried below. The last Adam was, in a literal sense, washing the first Adam in his own redemptive blood. This is the unbelievable detail that the Western world left on the cutting room floor, but which the tribes of Ethiopia have protected for 2 millennia. So, why does any of this matter to us today? Why should we care about the forgotten stories of Adam and Eve or the Cave of Treasures? It matters because these scrolls remind us that our history is deeper, richer, and more supernatural than we are often told. We are not merely the products of a random biological process, but the heirs to a lineage that carries the memory of Eden in its very bones. The Ethiopian Bible invites us to see the world through a different lens. It shows us that every death, every tragedy, and every fall has been accounted for within a master plan that spans millennia. From the gold hidden in a cave to the blood spilled on a wooden cross, the full story of Adam is ultimately a story of profound hope. It tells us that even though we lost our garments of light, there has always been a path being forged back to the garden. The tribes and the keepers of these scrolls, in the remote monasteries of Aksum and Lalibela, have done the world a great service. They have kept the flame of this sacred narrative alive when the rest of the world sought to extinguish it. As we conclude this exploration, we are left with the powerful reminder that the most vital parts of our story are often the ones that were meant to be hidden, waiting for the right time to be revealed.